Hello, everybody. If you go ahead and introduce yourselves, starting with my mom over here,
Hi, I'm Gretchen, Kyle's mom.
and Adrian. Awesome. Sam. Okay. And Cameron. Great. And Brenda. Great. Okay. So below,
Sure, Vanessa, if I could hear the
below
conversation.
I've linked a PowerPoint for you guys to look at about this speech that you're about to hear, and I'm going to go ahead and get started. So, what are some of the real social and economic effects of Syrian refugees in the countries that have accepted them? We have all heard about the Syrian refugee crisis to some extent from the media, and it's important to consider a couple of important questions that have permeated the discussion. For example, is the economic impact of Syrian refugees manageable? Are there insurmountable cultural differences between us and Syrian refugees? And, probably most importantly, do Syrian refugees commit terrorism? These three questions are primary concerns, so let's answer a few of them. The negative economic impact of Syrian refugees is small for larger countries and a little bit more noticeable for the smaller ones that border Syria, but less impactful than you might think. According to an article written on theeconomist.com, refugees in the country of Germany are responsible for just a 2% depression in menial wage jobs like cleaning. However, refugees that have been in the country for less than 6 years are 17% more likely than other legal immigrants to require the government aid as their primary source of income. According to an article on Georgetown Journal, Syrian refugees in the neighboring country of Jordan have had a very small, if at all noticeable, effect on the labor market, positive or negative, but they've had a huge impact on their budget, an estimated 35% of its annual budget in 2015 to be precise. So while the economic impact of Syrian refugees is definitely absorbable by larger countries with high domestic gross product, what are some of the cultural differences between us? There's a great deal of conflicting cultural differences that I'd like to point out, mainly having to deal with the treatment of women between us and the Middle East. According to a backgrounder written by CORE, or the Cultural Orientation Resource Center, many of these cultural differences include the ability to marry one's daughter at the age of 13 to another man from a different family against their will. Sexual violence against women is so prevalent in asylum seeking countries that it is very uncommon to see a woman outside without a male protector. And um, domestic violence is actually legal against women in these countries. Uh, According to an article written on the RT website, the act of Taharush Gamia, or which is Arabic for collective assault game, is actually a thing that has taken place in Cologne, Germany on New Year's Eve in 2015. During this time, an estimated 2,000 men assaulted an estimated 1,200 women. As these facts indicate, Western culture and Middle Eastern culture are very different. But do these differences indicate a insurgence of terrorism among Syrian refugees? Generally speaking, no. The vast majority of Syrian refugees are not terrorists, nor is there any substantial evidence to suggest that they endorse the actions of organizations like ISIS. Uh, for example, one of the most notable terrorist attacks to happen in recent memory is, according to the Telegraph.co, one that happened in Paris on November 13th in 2015. All seven of these attackers were born in either Belgium or France, not Syria. But it is important to note that one of the attackers used a false passport of an asylum seeker, presumably to receive training in Syria and move from country to country. Um, while Syrian refugees may not be terrorists, it's very clear that ISIS can use the Syrian refugee crisis to their advantage in moving units and training them. So, Syrian refugees come from a world that's very different than ours. Larger European countries can afford them, and the cultural differences between asylum seekers and the Western world are not to be ignored. Thank you, and that's the end of my speech.
You're supposed to end a speech with "I'm at the end of my
All right. So if everyone could introduce, or rather, say what they thought about the speech one more time, starting with my mom.
I thought it was very impressive.
Awesome. And Adrian. Thank you. And Sam. Cool. Cameron. Awesome. And Brenda, what'd you think? Awesome. Okay. And that concludes this recording.